This is being made to happen. And the more digging that one does on this issue, the more you realize just how much it is being made to happen. Where it's not just President Biden throwing open the border. It's not just him repealing the Remain in Mexico policy. It is not just sanctuary cities luring in illegal immigrants and rewarding them with hotels and prepaid debit cards to keep them there. It's not just the census stuff. U.S. taxpayer money is going towards NGOs and other organizations which are facilitating migrants on their journey from Central and South America into the United States. Conspiracy theory, right? No, it's not. It's really not. Okay, let's look here, okay? This is the UN Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. This is their logo. This was a meeting that was brought together in 2016 called the UN Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. By the way, interesting, they say regular migration. They want migration. Usually if the UN would get together, you might want to talk about how to mitigate migration, how to make the circumstances in individuals' countries hospitable for them to live there and survive there and not be subject to human rights abuses there, instead of facilitating their exit from those countries. So that's interesting that a stated goal, indeed in the logo, is regular migration. But anyway, in 2016, a bunch of UN member countries came together and for this meeting. And then in 2018, there was a vote in favor of what was agreed upon in that 2016 meeting, and 152 nations voted in favor of that agreement. The United States did not vote in favor of that agreement. And essentially what it did was allocate a lot of money, funding, time, resources, personnel to these UN entities and UN affiliated NGOs to facilitate global migration. Let's look at a picture of Central and South America. So what's happening is that a lot of people have to cross through what's called the Darien Gap. This is a very dense and dangerous jungle, which is between the borders of Colombia and Panama. And many people die on that journey because it is a very, as I said, unsafe, dense, and dangerous terrain to cross through. And so what many of these NGOs have done, and the UN organizations have done, is set up migration tents and maps and resources for people to traverse safely through that Darien Gap to get to Panama and to get to other parts of Central America so as to enter the United States. What other immigrants are doing is that they're flying into countries like Ecuador, which we see right there is just below and on the coast, below Colombia, that is. And Ecuador is one of those countries which does not require a visa to enter. So people from other parts of South America are flying to Ecuador, and actually from around the world too are flying to Ecuador, going up through Colombia, crossing with the help of the NGOs through the Darien Gap, and then getting sort of up and up to Mexico, and then crossing into the United States. So to give you some specifics of these NGOs and these organizations which are doing this, there's one that's called the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, and it is the UN's migration, basically, main entity. And by the way, this is confusing if you read a lot about it, because there are a lot of different NGOs, there are a lot of different entities. Like, it's very, I think, purposefully disorganized, and a lot of different people doing a lot of different things, but I'm just focusing on the main ones here. So one of the main ones is this IOM, the International Organization for Migration. They call migration, quote, a force for good in the world. So it is indeed a stated principle to facilitate migration instead of focusing the efforts on making those countries better so as not to have immigrants need to migrate. The director of the IOM is a lady named Amy Pope, and she is President Biden's senior advisor on migration. She also was a Homeland Security advisor to President Obama. And during President Biden's time in office, he has heavily increased funding to the IOM, U.S. taxpayer money funding to the IOM. So if we look at Donald Trump and Joe Biden, under President Trump, the U.S. gave about $500 million taxpayer dollars to the UN's International Organization for Migration. President Biden, in 2023 alone, gave $1.3 billion to the IOM. And one of the State Department entities which gave one of the biggest grants to the IOM during 2023, they said that they are doing this, quote, to fund processing individuals requesting refugee status and resettlement in the United States and arrange their movement. So the U.S. State Department is admitting that they are trying to process people here and have them resettle and arrange their movement here. This is just something that we should know. At the very least, we should understand that this is an objective of the U.S. government, and we should understand that our taxpayer money is being given to facilitate this global migration. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, you can say that we have a humanitarian obligation to do this, you can say that we have an obligation to help our people first, but it is something that everyone should know about. And it's a little shady that we don't know about it. So to give like a little bit more color to this, because there, all these entities, the UN organization, they use a lot of that money, the 1.3 billion, in cash and vouchers. That's what they call it, one of their line items. Multi-purpose cash assistance is another thing they say, where essentially they give prepaid debit cards to migrants through this UN migration agency to help them on their journey. So here's an example, and this is actually an archived post on Twitter where someone who was working for the IOM, this UN migration agency, was in Central America, and he took photos and posted on Twitter of how migrants are getting these prepaid debit cards. Again, you can agree with it, you can disagree with it, you can say we have a humanitarian obligation, but I think we can all agree a lot of people don't know that this is happening. Here's another example of a Haitian migrant in Mexico who has a prepaid debit card. I mean, for a moment, when you look at that and you see how much these people are struggling, you see what they are fleeing. I mean, many of them are fleeing war-torn, poverty-stricken countries. They have destitute situations in their own countries. Many are just trying to get to America to have a better life. I have enormous sympathy for those individuals. Who wouldn't? I mean, of course, there are bad actors taking advantage of this, and we have to acknowledge that. But certainly there are many people who are so desperate. And wouldn't you do that? I know if I were a mother and I were being, overrun and abused by gangs and raped, and, I was living in poverty in my country, I would take advantage of all of this to come to the United States, of course. So when we talk about this, like, people are so, easy to jump. They're so quick to jump in and go, oh, if you're exposing this, you're xenophobic. It's not xenophobia. It's not hatred. It's just exposing what our taxpayer money is funding. Let's just look at another example. This is from the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. It's one of the biggest NGOs operating in Central and South America. And it's a US-funded NGO. It also gets UN funding, although it's not directly affiliated with the UN like the IOM is. And they have maps where they show people how to most efficiently get to the United States border. They have bus stops, they have warnings about terrain, they have indication where there are migrant camps where they can get water and food, etc. Just something you should know. And trust me, I could give many more examples of all of the different NGOs that receive our taxpayer funding that are facilitating this crisis and have gotten a big boost since President Biden took office. But I think that is pretty sufficient for understanding what is going on. Sean, what's your reaction to this?
Well, Alejo was just sharing an interesting tidbit with me. Alejandro Mayorkas was a board member of HIAS up until the moment he was appointed by Biden to Homeland Security.
Fascinating,
So
right?
Stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Hey, that's my line.
That's not your line.
Okay. You're right. I don't own it. Yes, but just a quick note, and then we'll move on to something really totally non-political and fun. But I was talking with someone who immigrated to this country legally recently, and one of the things he said to me, and I thought it was an excellent point, was, I feel penalized for doing this the right way. Like, and I hear this when I talk with a lot of legal immigrants, where they go, wait a minute, I could have just crossed in illegally. I don't have to pay taxes. Like, I can be the recipient of a lot of, programs. It doesn't mean that I know a lot of illegal immigrants here, for all of the resources they are getting, they are also living on the streets. They have terrible situations here. It's not to say that, illegal immigrants are being put up in a palace, but you take my point that a lot of people who have come to this country legally, it sends a message of, it offers bad incentives, that when they see that people can just come illegally and not have to pay taxes, why would you do things lawfully? It's not a good road to go down.
I want to live in the America that this is our biggest problem, and that we're not hemorrhaging money in our government into places we don't know about, wasting taxpayer money, and we had the funding to deal with this, because people that want to come here, the great majority of them, work hard and do the right thing. And this gets wasted because we have to spend our time looking like xenophobes just for talking about protecting the borders of this great nation, when people want to come here for obvious reasons that on a micro level make complete sense, and it's humanitarian and it's compassionate. And I wish our government were in order and we weren't wasting money all over the place so that we could afford things like this.
Right.
What a wonderful world it would be.
But here's the thing. We also have to take care of our own first. And that's why it was very important to me to put in those stats, about how veteran homelessness has increased by 7.2% from 2022 to 2023. Homelessness generally saw the biggest uptick since they started even keeping track of that data, 12% from 2022 to 2023. We have to take care of our own first. That's not xenophobic. That doesn't mean we don't have a profound amount of sympathy for people in other countries coming here in their destitute situation. But when we have Americans, and especially American veterans, who are on the street, and we are bypassing them to give money and shelter and aid to people who are not citizens of our own country, that is sick.